welcome back to the third installment of Ghetto Stories. Oh, yeah. Today's story is another 6th grade one, because 6th grade sucked, and I was lied to. So, originally, as I've said many times, life in 6th grade, it sucked. But everyone was just a douchebag in 6th grade. We had the edgelord kids that said that their parents knew how to kill someone, which I like how I get put on the FBI watch list, but as soon as someone says, oh, I can send someone to murder you, I'm like, it's like suddenly they're off. Suddenly they're off the list. So essentially, I was. This is one of the stories which just it gets bad because I don't know what this school was thinking at all. Blatantly, at all, bro. So, in my school, the way our in-school detention center would work is, it was bad. There was a waiting list, surprisingly, which my mom doesn't stop to bring up anytime we talk about that school, because she really hates the school. She's like, they have a waiting list for in-school suspension. And she even said every day she was on the phone with her friends. For some reason, my son's school has an in-school, and it's like, I get it. And I actually didn't understand either. Why? How many kids are that bad that they get in-school suspension? Like, really? And it's like, why? And it's like, here's my thing. I was a really aggressive kid. Because the reason I ended up in there was because I was feeling really depressed one day, and I decided to mollywop somebody in the face, and somehow that made us friends. Guys have weird ways of becoming friends. And so I think we're off the hook because me and this kid are cool, right? We apologized. And tell me why. Because my teacher reported, and apparently our principal was out for vacation for like a few days. So he didn't get it until literally 3 months before school ended. 3 months. Mind you, I did all of this like in October. And 3 months near the end of school, that's like, I don't know, somewhere like near March? Yeah, like near March, I think. I don't know, I don't remember the months properly, but it's like, he gets back and he calls me in one day for no reason, and I'm like, okay, mustn't be anything bad, must be congratulating me or something, or just asking me questions. Tell me why I go in there. Homie's like, so, have a seat. I'm like, alright, sure. So I'm like, getting ready to sit down, and he's like, so, I had a call a few months ago that you hit someone in the face, that you punched someone in the face. And I'm like, yeah, that was a few months ago. And he was like, why'd you do that? I was like, oh yeah, because I was like angry. And so he's like, oh, well, what were you guys talking about? And I was like, well, we were talking about who was stronger. And mind you, I was stronger. Trust me. And he was like, and he started laughing, like, cause he was like, so you were fighting because you wanted to prove who was stronger. And then I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, I'm gonna have to, like, call your mom and tell her, because this can't go unfit. I'm like, alright. And as soon as he said, I'm gonna call your mom, I started shaking. I was like, yeah, man, not good. And I was like, I was thinking of being like, I could just tell her my number, but then I remember,
Okay,
wait a minute, this is the 21st century.
How do I find these
So,
bombs?
technically, he has my mother's number on paper in his files. I'm like, oh, well, that plan would not work at all. So, I'm like, dang, what do I do? I'm trapped in a corner. So he calls my mom and she's like, and I could tell over the phone she was angry because I heard her scream, what? And I was just sitting there like, oh God, please help me. And he's like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to send you to in-school suspension, but there's a waiting list, so we can't send you just yet. And then I'm like, oh, wait, hold up, what? So then the rest of the day goes by. I get out of school, and I just know that I'm gotta get beat.
Go.
As soon as we get home.
Simple fuses. Submerging them should defuse them.
Yeah.
They're armed. Shit. A booby trap. You got minutes, Hefe. Get as many in the water as you can. We gotta save that harbor.
So essentially, I'm like, oh, because she's looking at me with determination to beat me. She's like, why'd you hit this kid in the face? I'm like, because we were arguing about who was stronger. And she's like, she didn't even say anything. And I was just scared. And I was like,
That's a bomb.
Get it into the water.
Here's another.
So I'm like chilling in the car. I'm like, I know what's about to happen, and I'm scared. And I'm essentially just like waiting, and so I tell her that I can't go in because there's a waiting list. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah, I can't go in because apparently there's a waiting list. I have to wait till next week to get in. And she's like, why would they have a waiting list for kids that aren't in school suspension? I'm like, I don't know. And so while she's yelling at me, being like, oh, I'm gonna beat you when we get home, I'm just sitting there. I'm like, yeah, I'm still confused why they have an in-school suspension too. And let's just say that as soon as I got home, stuff was not that good at all. So I get home, get beat. So, you know, the essentials, because you can't just go molly-whopping people in the face. And I'm just chilling, and after, I'm just like doing my homework. And then next week comes, I go in, and I'm like, okay, I'ma just see where it happens, because I didn't know where the in-school suspension classroom was. So I essentially was just like, went to my first period and just like hoped that they would call me in to take me in there. So essentially, I got in there, and like after the bell rung, I was just like chilling in my classroom, and then out of nowhere, my science teacher was like, hey, yo, you have to go to the in-school suspension place. And I'm like, okay. He gives me a note, tells me where it is, and I walk over there to go get it. And sudden, as I enter, I see one of the kids from my math class, which didn't even deserve to be in there, because let me tell you, he got hit in the face for no reason, and technically, he didn't even like fight back or anything. My dude got in there, because how our school suspension works is that if you get into a fight, meaning if you get hit, you're going to in-school suspension. Even if you didn't do anything, you're going.
Yeah, let's go.
Like, you're going. Like, there's no way of getting out of this. You're going. And he's like, oh, Donald? Because we couldn't talk in the classroom at all. So essentially, he's just like sitting there whispering, like, Donald, how'd you end up in here? I was like, well, I was a little like mad yesterday, and so I like hit someone in the face. And he's like, oh, dang, man. Well, here's some tips, bro. Just do all the work, and you'll be out in like no time. I'm like, okay. So he goes back, and I'm just chilling. So the teacher gives me a packet to work on, and I'm just essentially like, oh, well, okay then. So I sit down, and she's like, walks off, does nothing, and I'm just being pretty chill. I'm sitting there, I'm working, and then I like get up to ask her some questions, and then she's like, oh, go sit down, dude. And then I was like, dang. It's like, I know I did some bad things, but it's like, there's some things you don't need to be rude about, and it's like, I obviously didn't say that, because I'm not trying to have more time ended up in there. And it's like, I'm just like, okay, I walk back over, I sit down, and I essentially just be in there doing my work, and my teachers give me my work for the days I was in there. Because originally, I was supposed to be in there for 5 days. But tell me why I ended up in there for a total amount of like 10.
Here's another.
So it's like, I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on here, because like, my homeboy left the classroom, and I'm like, okay, so obviously I just have to get my work done as quick as possible. But the thing is that you have to get all the answers correct. Alright, you have to fact check it to the person that's watching in the classroom so that you get an A. So I walk up thinking there's no problem, and she's like, oh, that's not right, go fix these two. I'm like, why? But I'm like, I'm not saying anything. And so I just take the paper, I walk back, and I'm like, okay. So I go try to solve this, and half of them were just from my math class, because 6th grade math, it's hard. To put it like that simply, it's hard. So I'm chilling, alright, like listening to songs in my head, since if I were to even bring the phone out, I'd most likely end up with a few more days on my hand. And it's like, here's the thing, I know that the kids that ended up in there were bad, but they don't need to be technically like verbally abused.
Let's roll.
Cause for Christ's sake, bro, our teacher was like verbally harassing us, bro. And it's like, technically, it's like, I get it. We're bad children. That's like, that doesn't earn like the fact of being verbally told that you should shut your mouth. And the kid was just asking to go to the bathroom. That should not be happening. There's no excuse for that. There's like no good excuse for why that should ever happen. Cause like the kid got up, he asked, can I use the bathroom? And she's like, no, shut up for like, you're being so annoying. God, stop. And I'm like, well, okay, like, dang, bro, like, no reason, he was just asking. So then, it's like, one of the kids got sick and tired of her crap, and I was like, well, you know, screw you. It's like, I'm gonna go anyway, because I have to use the bathroom. And she was like, okay, well, that's a few more days. And it's like, alright, I'll take those days with pride then, I guess. And so, like, I'm, like, doing my work. My 5 days comes. I only had a few more lessons, and she was like, oh, you have to finish up all your lessons before you go.
30 seconds.
And the problem is that you have to have all of them right. So, I stayed in there for like an extra 5 days until the school was like, okay, yeah, you have to let them out now. Can't keep them in there. So then I'm like, yeah, let me go. So I'm chilling. And it's like, I get stuck in there. The 10 days comes, I finish all my work, I leave. Tell me why the next day I go in with the polo, and it's Spirit Day, alright? The rules for Spirit Day is that you could wear anything that has something to do with any APS school, meaning that you could wear any Lobos hoodies, alright, any UNM hoodies, or any of the school's merchandising. And I was like, okay, so I wear a Lobos t-shirt,
Let's go.
and I'm walking past the hall because I had to go through the front door because I was like running late. I'm like, I run past the like suspension like operator or advisor or whatever, and she's like, oh, let me see your shirt. I was like, okay, but it's Spirit Day though. And she's like, I don't care, let me see your shirt. I was like, alright. So I show her, and then she's like, you're not wearing a polo. I'm like, well, that's because it's Spirit Day. It's like, the rules specifically say I don't have to wear a polo as long as I have something that has to do with Spirit Day. And she's like, well, I don't care, those rules don't apply to me. And I'm like, how'd you get hired for this job? Because it's like, Christ's sake, woman, you're just a horrible person. So she's like, I'm giving you this polo shirt and you're gonna go in here. And she's like, that's a 3-day suspension. I'm like, that's not even an official 3-day suspension, homegirl. So why are you doing this to me? And then she's like, oh, too bad. And I'm like, why are you doing this? So I end up in there, and a kid was like, yo man, how'd you end up in here? I was like, well, apparently I can't wear a shirt around here even though it's Spirit Day, so you know, that's fun. And she like, and he's like, oh, you too, man? Because apparently he wasn't allowed to wear his Spirit Day shirt either.
10 seconds.
And I'm like, oh, wow, so she's just mean to be mean then. And he's like, yeah, essentially, man. Essentially. And so we leave after that day, show back up the next day with polos on. I'm like, I hate this. And apparently on that day, some kid bought tickets to go to a volleyball game, right?
No one here either.
And he got up in school suspension for, I think it was like stealing or something. And he was like, hey, yo, I have to go to the volleyball game. And the teacher was like, nah. And he's like, yeah, but I paid with my own money. And she's like, I don't care. You end up in here. You're staying here. And he's like, but I paid with my own hard-earned money by doing my chores at my house. I'm going. So he gets up, takes his bag, and walks out the door. And he's like, and she's like, okay, annoying, you annoying idiot. No wonder why you're bad. You're not gonna achieve anything. And then he's like walking out, and then she picks up the walkie-talkie and is like, one of my kids was getting in an argument and decided to walk out the door for no reason. And I did nothing. We were perfectly silent. And it's like, really? And it's like, I understand that he was a bad kid, but let's be honest, if he pays with something with his own money, he should technically be entitled to see that whole game throughout. Or else that's just a waste of a ticket. It's like, I don't care what you say, but if you waste your money, but if you use your money and you don't let a person go to that event, then who says that they're going to waste money on another one of your events again? It's like, and this school was the worst school ever. And I saw this woman's car, and I was playing one day. I was like, maybe it wouldn't hurt to just blow it up one day, you know, just come back, hire someone, like, not even with her inside it, just blow up her car. Like, not kill her, just blow up her car. And then just have her scream, why? And then I'm just be in the background in my mom's car, like, yeah. And it's like, she was just mean to be mean. It's like, every time she brought one of her friends in so she could go eat lunch, they were cool. It's like, sometimes they would talk to us, ask us if we needed help, be like, yo, if any of you need to use the bathroom, do it now. And they were a whole lot better. It's like, they were telling jokes when it needed to be, and when the jokes were over, they would be, okay guys, get back to work. And they were cool. That's why every time when she'd bring one of her friends in, I'd be like, oh, lit time. Because it's like, the teacher, one of the teachers came in and was like, hey, yo, Donald. And I was like, yeah. So, apparently here on your file, it says that you're in here because you found out who was strong. Because you're trying to figure out who was stronger. I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, did any of you guys figure out who was strongest? I was like, no. And he was like, oh, wow. Okay. So he starts laughing. We have a laugh. And he's like, all right, man, get back to work. I'm like, okay. I'm pretty chill.
Plug me in, and I'll take a look.
Like, I'm really chill. And she comes back, and I'm like, oh, wow. Here we go again. And I think that was, like, the same day as the volleyball. And the weirdest part is that she used that whole thing where it's like, the bells don't dismiss you. I do. Then what are the bells for? To remind you when we go leave? Because if the bell don't dismiss you, you do, then I see no point for there to be a bell in the building. Not for a reminder, because according to you, according from what you're saying, you know when we're supposed to leave. So, why are they there? And we get out, and tell me why, alright? One time, I farted near one at the end of the day. I say, excuse me, and one of the kids are like, oh,
Right.
Donald farted, and And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, oh, you need to control your bladder. And I'm like, all I did was fart. And she was like, and the kids weren't helping. They were saying, oh, he didn't say excuse me. He didn't do nothing. I'm like, but I did though. So then she's like, oh, well, that's another 3 days. You're gotta be in here. When will you learn? And I'm like, for farting, fam? For farting. So I get out. I tell my mom, and even she's like, really? They're putting you back in suspension for farting. I'm like, yeah, for farting. And it's like, why? And that, I'm pretty sure that's why half of the kids there were messed up. I'm pretty sure that's why the school is like one of the worst schools in my state, bro. Like the worst one. I only went there for desperate measures. I'm starting to even debate on if those measures were even. I'm starting to decide if it was even worth going to that school just so my mom doesn't end up in jail. And it's like, I am balling, alright, because I joined video game club at the time, and this was like during the time when I uploaded the poop emoji videos. Trust me, long story. And I'm like, oh wow. I really can't believe they're about to put me back in suspension for farting. For farting, fam. One of a thing that the body does. A thing that the body does. I am back in suspension for it. Wow. Just wow. So I go to video game club. I'm telling my friends, I'm telling Brody and David, and they're like, oh wow, that's dumb. Why would they do that to you? I tell more of my friends, and they're like, that's just dumb. Why? Don't go tell your mom or something. And I'm like, yeah, I know. That's what I'm about to do. And then yeah. I go there for the 3 days. I return back to class. And suddenly, this teacher doesn't bother me anymore.
Get out, okay? Please.
We're cool. Surprisingly. She has no problems with me. We're cool. I'm like, how you just finna treat me like this? Alright, how you just finna put me back in school suspension for 3 days and farting, and then have the nerve to say hi to me while you walk past the hall? I hate you. Screw you. I hate you. I just hate you. I don't like you. It's like, why? Why? Don't act buddy now. Don't act buddy now. And then I remember another time I threw up in that class. And I had to go to the nurse. And my sister was picking me up that day because my mom was out on a business trip. I was staying with my sister at the time. She picks me up, and I'm like, oh, thank God, because I don't have to be in there any longer. So I go home. I go to my sister's house. I get to my homework, and I'm like, ugh, dang. And she's like, yo, you alright? And I'm like, yeah, I think it was just because it was like hot in there. It was like really, really hot in there for no reason. It's like this woman either wanted it to be the desert or she wanted it to be Antarctica. And I'm like, yeah, I think it was just like the temperature or something. So then, after that, nothing happens. We're good. We are all good. Luckily, I never went back to that school for 7th grade. Thank God I didn't. I actually went to another one last year. Obviously, not gonna say the name for protective reasons. So, yeah, you know, fun. Got banded for farting. Punching a kid in the face. Wearing a shirt, wearing my spirit shirt on Spirit Day. The day where you're allowed to wear anything that has something to do either with UNM, Lobos, or the school's merchandising. Or the colors, technically. It's like, technically, I shouldn't even gotten banned. Alright, I shouldn't even gotten suspended. In-school suspension that day. The rules is that you had to wear the colors. You either had to wear the colors of the school, wear any clothing representing UNM or Lobos, or you wear the school merchandising. Alright? I had a purple no, it wasn't even a Lobo shirt that day. It was a purple shirt, alright? It was like a purple t-shirt. It was like one of my mom's, because I didn't have any t-shirts that day. And I wore a Lobos hoodie over it, because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna double show off today. And then that happened to me. But yeah, that was Ghetto Story 3, bro.
Sure is shaking things up around here.
So, yeah, make sure you like the video, comment, subscribe.
Please just pull over and let me out.
Free.
Or just slow down. I'll risk it.
Because you want to, because you're a legend.
Listen, it's not even my car.